Great, I think everyone is logged on. Before we get started, we wanted to just go over a few instructions about the Zoom feature. So I'm going to turn it over to Mariana Lopez, who will be going over the language options for this evening's meeting.
Gracias, Esmeralda. Buenas tardes a todos. Estas instrucciones se repetirán en español. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. We're offering simultaneous interpretation in Spanish during this meeting. If you wish to hear the Spanish interpretation, please click on the interpretation button at the bottom right corner of your Zoom screen. You will see a globe icon that will be turned on right after these instructions. If you're joining us via the Zoom smartphone app, please select the language by clicking More or the three dots in the bottom right corner of your screen. Select Language Interpretation, then choose Spanish and click Done. If you wish to hear only the interpreter and not the original speaker, be sure to click Mute Original Audio. Buenas tardes a todos. Estamos ofreciendo interpretación simultánea al español durante esta reunión. Si desea escuchar la interpretación en español, haga clic en el botón de interpretación en la parte inferior derecha de la pantalla Zoom. Verá un icono de globo terráqueo que se encenderá justo después de estas instrucciones. Si nos acompaña a través de la aplicación Zoom para teléfonos inteligentes, seleccione su idioma haciendo clic en donde dice More o Más o en los tres puntos en la esquina inferior derecha de la pantalla. Seleccione Interpretación del idioma, después elige Español y termine con donde dice Done o Listo. Si desea escuchar solo al intérprete y no al orador original, asegúrese de hacer clic en Mute Original Audio. Back to you, Esmeralda.
Gracias, Mariana. Well, welcome everyone. Just want to go over some reminders about the Zoom feature. So there is Spanish language translation. So if you are listening through the English channel, you will also need to select on the interpretation globe for English. And that will ensure that you're able to hear the translation if there is interpretation. I will be the facilitator for tonight's workshop, but to get started, I'm going to turn it over to Don Chase, who will kick off our workshop. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this public Zoom meeting. We are very excited to hold these meetings and looking forward to hearing your comments and perspectives tonight. My name is Donald Chase. I'm a planning manager for the County of San Diego. Our agenda for tonight includes an introduction to the team, some context and understanding the purpose of tonight's meeting, discussion of our main task, which is the identification of environmental justice communities and the role of public input in the process, and next steps, including upcoming workshops and how to continue to be engaged. Again, my name is Don, and I'd like to introduce you to some of my colleagues on this project. So here today with us also is Denise Vo with the County of San Diego. And some of the meeting facilitation notes that we would like to quickly go over include that this meeting is being conducted by the County of San Diego in partnership with MIG Consultants. This meeting will last for approximately an hour and a half, during which members of our team will give a short presentation, and there will be time for questions at designated moments during that presentation, and you're welcome to type questions into the chat at any time. However, please, we won't be answering questions until the designated time, so just to keep the presentation moving forward. There will be additional time for questions and discussion at the end of the presentation as well. The presentation portion of this meeting is being recorded and will be available on the project website, which Joey is adding now to the chat. The Q&A discussion session after the presentation will not be recorded. So again, thank you everyone for joining us today. We are here with an important opportunity to revisit the county's environmental justice element, and we're grateful to have all of you here joining this process, which is just beginning. The county is committed to bringing the community into the process to help expand the identification of environmental justice communities, and we want to identify other criteria to assist us in identifying communities who have historically been disenfranchised and burdened by the climate crisis. We will provide some background and context as to how the county has been approaching disenfranchised communities, and then we would like to hear from you. My colleague Denise Vo will give us some context for the project.
Thank you, Don. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Denise Vo, and I will now go over some context to set the stage for today's presentation. Last year, the county's Board of Supervisors adopted the environmental justice element into the general plan, which is a long-term plan that guides future growth and development in the county. Within the general plan, there are 7 topic-specific chapters called elements, which are like chapters of a book. The elements in the general plan include land use, mobility, housing, conservation and open space, environmental justice, safety, and noise. Today, we are focusing on the environmental justice element, which will also be referred to as the EJ element throughout today's presentation. The EJ element assesses environmental burdens across the county and outlines strategies for reducing those burdens in areas designated as having high risk. These areas of high risk are called environmental justice communities in the County of San Diego. The EJ element is required to address 7 topic areas, which include pollution exposure and air quality, resources for physical activity, provision of and access to public facilities such as libraries and community centers, opportunities for civic engagement, safe and sanitary homes, programs for disadvantaged communities, and healthy food access. The EJ element will help the county develop goals and policies related to the 7 topic areas. In this project, we are revisiting the EJ element for the purpose of potentially expanding upon what we in the County of San Diego mean by environmental justice communities. At this time, I will turn it back to Esmeralda.
Great, thank you, Denise. And so before we get started, we will be utilizing one of the tools that we have available to us over Zoom to gather feedback and questions from the group. But first, want to just go back to what Donald said about the facilitation team. So my name is Esmeralda, and I'm part of the consulting group that is doing the facilitation and doing the analysis in collaboration with the county. I'm joined here this evening by many of our team who are backstage, and I'm also joined by Allison Lee, who will be doing part of the presentation as we get moving along too. But before we get started, we wanted to, again, get folks familiar with the tool, but I see that people have already been typing into the chat. Share with us whether this is your first time hearing about EJ or environmental justice, or if you're well versed about it, that's fine too. We want to just get familiar with who all is in the room here, whether you're knowledgeable about it or not, or how much you know about it, and also just to make sure that folks are familiar with using the chat. And so I see that there are quite a few comments here. And no, it's not the first time. Great. So there's a lot of maybe a few folks here who are familiar with the topic. And again, feel free to type in. We'll be using this as a feature to gather comments and questions in subsequent portions of the agenda. So just want to make sure that folks are familiar with this. Okay, great. So people who are knowledgeable about the topic, fantastic. So thank you then for your input. Now I'm going to turn it over to Allison Lee, who will go over a few more details about what this process is all about.
Thanks, Esmeralda. Hi, everybody. My name is Allison, and I'll be diving a bit deeper into what we mean by environmental justice communities, which we also refer to as EJ communities. I see from the chat that people are familiar with it, but for those of us who are not as familiar, I can just provide a brief overview. So EJ communities are areas within the unincorporated County of San Diego that experience significant environmental burdens that typically lead to higher health risks. For example, a community with environmental burdens might be located close to pollution sources or have few or no parks nearby. But it can also mean a community that has lower access to healthy foods, or that they are historically disenfranchised or overlooked in the planning process. In the 2021 EJ element, the County of San Diego used 2 data tools to identify environmental justice communities. The 2 data tools are CalEnviroScreen, which is statewide, and LiveWell San Diego, which is regional. Both of these data tools look at a variety of different factors like air pollution, asthma rates, proximity to toxic waste sites, and more, to assess whether certain areas are more or less environmentally healthy. While these two data tools are very useful and well established, when we consider the 7 topic areas that are required in the EJ element, there are gaps in what the data tools measure versus what the EJ element aims to address. You can see here, for example, that CalEnviroscreen does include indicators related to pollution, exposure, and air quality, but it does not have indicators related to public facilities, safe and sanitary homes, or healthy food access. While it's not mandatory that the tools cover all target areas, the county is looking at ways that the criteria might be expanded to address topics like public facilities, safe and sanitary homes, healthy food access, physical activity, and targeted programs for improvements. We want to make sure that all voices are heard and that issues relevant to the unincorporated communities are addressed. To this aim, the county is examining other data tools to potentially expand how we define EJ communities within the unincorporated areas. Some of the additional tools, such as Justice 40, are linked to federal initiatives. Some of the data tools are linked to statewide efforts, like the California Healthy Places Index, the California Air Resources Board, the California Department of Water Resources, and the California Housing and Community Development Department. Others are more local or regional. So Live Well San Diego and the San Diego Association of Governments focus on more regional data. Some of these tools are directly or indirectly attached to funding or grant opportunities, but others also have no financial effect and are purely for information sharing and planning. All of these tools can be found online with more specific information about what they include in their analyses and what geography they cover. These tools are helpful in assessing environmental burdens as a whole because they look at the many factors affecting a single area. But before we get to the data tools, we first need to understand the experiences on the ground. What are residents and workers and community members experiencing day to day? What are their concerns regarding air pollution or access to healthy foods or other environmental burdens that they may face? These are the types of questions we want to ask during this initial phase of the project. And I'll pass it back to Esmeralda now for a quick poll.
Great, thanks, Allison. So both Denise and Allison described the 7 topics that are required to be addressed through an environmental justice element. And so, pollution exposure, things related to air quality, access to healthy food, physical activity, safe and sanitary homes, public facilities, civic engagement, and also looking at programs for disadvantaged communities. So we're going to use this feature here. It's a polling feature, so you can take your phone. If you are on a desktop and you have your phone accessible, you can use the QR code on the screen, or you can click on the link in the chat. And we have a poll that we're going to make available to folks, and then we're going to share the results. So which environmental burdens are of greatest concern in the community that you're representing or that you live in? What is most important? What are things that should be considered? So what are the burdens in your community that are of greatest concern? So we'll take a few moments to have people log on to the polling feature. So again, you can use the QR code or you can use the link in the chat to access that. So we'll take a few moments if we can get that also in the chat. So I think it's in there. So if you click on the link, it's www.menti.com. And we see some people have already started typing in their response there. So it looks like civic engagement is something that people are pointing out as important. Understanding that they all are important too, which is what we're seeing from the other responses as well. Healthy food, all of them. Coastal access, flooding, industrial energy. Great. So thank you for your response. So this is just to get us warmed up and to get your feedback here. As Allison said, this is just one of the first steps. And as we get further into our presentation, you'll see our schedule for things and how this is our first touch point with the community since the EJ element process was kicked off the last time around. So we're back in the community now. So this is, again, our first conversation with community, and we're here to listen. So thank you for your feedback. So now we're going to go back to our presentation. Great, I'm going to turn it back over to Denise.
Thank you, Esmeralda, and thank you everyone for participating in our survey. Your feedback is very much appreciated. As Esmeralda mentioned, we are currently in early stages, and during this first phase, we really hope to build awareness of the project and what the project strives to accomplish, to reach a wide audience by creating accessible activities, and to get input from diverse stakeholders and neighborhoods, especially those that have been historically underserved or left out of the planning process. To go over our project timeline, again, phase 1 of the engagement process will continue to take place over the upcoming weeks. Phase 2 will include public engagement on best practices, feedback received during this current phase, and a more comprehensive overview of potential data tools that may be right-sized for the unincorporated area. We anticipate starting phase 2 in early 2023. And phase 3 will compare results of different criteria options, look closer at other data tools, and see what that might mean for the County of San Diego. We will be taking the feedback and gathered information to the Board of Supervisors, and we anticipate to do this in the summer of 2023. Again, we'd really like to thank everyone today for your participation. We greatly appreciate you taking the time out today to join us this evening, and we hope you continue to stay involved in the upcoming phases of the project. To learn more and receive updates, please visit our website as shown here on the screen. We'll also put it in the chat. You can also subscribe to the county's Gov Delivery to continue to receive email updates, and feel free to reach out to us directly with any questions you may have. Again, our contact information is there on the screen as well. And at this time, I'll pass it back to Esmeralda.
Great, thank you, Denise. So now we're opening up the floor here for questions that you might have related to the information that has been shared. As Denise said, this is, again, the first touch point. There are activities that will follow after this. And so, again, some information was shared here today, introductory. There will be another point where we have maybe more data and information to share in our next touch point. So we'll open it up, and please feel free to use the chat feature or raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question, or if there's information. If we can also scroll back to the PowerPoint if there are specific questions to the information that's been shared. But we also will be capturing or summarizing comments or questions on our digital whiteboard. So we'll pop that up in a bit. But questions from the group about any of the information that has been shared. And let's see if there are any in the chat here. I'll just go briefly through that. So one of the questions was whether the information here shared today will be available. And so yes, it will. So we encourage you to visit the website. So that's in the link there. And I think maybe, Sada, we may need to put that link back in, because I'm not seeing the hyperlink in there. I am seeing it for the Go Delivery, but not the others. Maybe we'll pop that in again. And so you're welcome to visit the website to get information there and learn about the latest updates about the process. But any questions from the group? Yeah, and there was a question about that I think, so the question was related to the CADWR, and so Allison did put a response in there, and there's more information, so you click on that link there to learn more. So let's see, we have a few hands up, so we'll go to Shasta, Gloria, and then Sarah. We'll go in that order, so go ahead, Shasta. are you able to unmute yourself?
There we go. Yeah, you had to give me permission to unmute, so that's why I was gesticulating wildly. Thank you for the opportunity. I have many questions, but I just want to start with the couple of things that you had as options for that first Menti poll. And looking at the responses you were getting, several of them were not from among those options that you listed, and it was set up so you could only put in one response, and then the poll closed. But I'm wondering how the county came up with those particular criteria of concern. And then another, not exactly the same question, but I clicked on one of the links and I was looking at the map of environmental justice communities in the unincorporated county that have already been identified. And I was shocked at how few there are. So I'm wondering what the future plans are for expanding and identifying more EJ communities in San Diego.
Yeah, those are great questions. And a lot of that is related to, what's outlined in what has to happen in a general plan. But I'll turn it over to Denise if you want to address those. So the first question was related to the options, which were the 7, which are the I guess that's the regulatory framework that's outlined in the in what is included in an EJ coming from the state of California. And then the second question was related to, wow, looking at the map, there are so few EJ communities. And so that is partly informed by, I think it was touched on in the presentation, by the data sets, which are Cal and Virus Screen is one, which most communities in the state use. But Denise, you want to pop in and address that?
Yeah, thank you. And so, your question is to how do we plan to expand that? And I think today that's our first step in doing that. We are wanting to see, what's going on, meeting everyone where they are, and that is going to help us inform potential options to further expand the identification of EJ communities. And so this is our first step here. This is our initial step to hear where the issues are, what gaps we're missing. And if we want to go back to that slide, that compares the current 2 data sources that we're using. And so that's the goal here, to hear from you, and then we will move forward to see how we can identify and address those issues that we have not accounted for.
Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
And then we have, next we have Gloria, Franco, and then Carla goes next. So let's go with Gloria.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, yeah, I got a lot of questions, but I guess the first question, and also thank y'all for having us here and having this this outreach. So I just want to start off by saying thank you. My first question is if the county plans to have any kind of coordinated outreach with Mayan and Spanish interpreters or speakers, because I know that in Palma Valley and Paula and more of that unincorporated area, and Fallbrook as well, Valley Center, we have a very large Guatemalan community, and they don't always speak Spanish, and we do have a Spanish speaking community as well there. So that's my first question. And then my second question is that if the county is doing some kind of outreach in this way, if they plan to go through a promotora model, which would be the trusted messenger kind of model, because some of these communities are very distrusting of the county or government in general. So that would be my second question. And then I think my third question would be more on the issues, or I think somebody touched on it, how these environmental justice communities are defined, because I know that a big concern and fear is fire safety, because during fire season and when it gets really heated, the evacuation plans and reaching out to some of these communities, it's pretty scary. So that's a big concern. And out of all, there's so many other concerns, but I think number 2 concern is food security, because there's not a lot of access to grocery stores, and it's pretty much food deserts in that area. And I think my 4th question, or it kind of be like a little sub bullet under how these EJ communities are defined, is if we're following under census data, or how we're getting these responses or surveys back. So that's kind of a little bullet under that question. And yeah, that's all the questions I have for right now. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Gloria. Quite a bit that's packed in there. So with regards to community engagement, as Denise said, this is our first touch point, and for the process, there was a community engagement plan that was developed that includes a number of strategies, and so small group discussions focused on the EJ communities is something that we're looking at. So all of this input that we're getting tonight will further refine how specifically we implement those. And thank you for the comments about the Guatemalan community, because those are things that we want to learn too. And of course, learning from the community or the people who live in those areas is most important, because that again will help to refine our process. And so in terms of the issues that you raised, those are great comments, because this is what we're looking at in this phase of the processes. What specifically do we need to be looking at in the EJ communities, because they're not all the same. It's not all the same landscape or community, right? And thank you. I think you pointed out fire safety, food security. And then the last point was related to the data analysis and how that was gathered, and how the census information is incorporated in that. So I kind of summarized your questions, and I'm going to turn it over to our team to see if they want to tag team on any of those to provide any finer detailed responses there.
Hi, yeah, I can jump in regarding the question about data. So we will definitely, want to use a lot of census data, but I would say that that's probably not the only data source that we'll be using. Currently, the 2 data tools that are used, Cal and VirusScreen and LiveWell, they use a mix. So Cal and VirusScreen looks at an array of data down to the census tract, which is a really useful kind of form of measurement. Looking at the other potential data tools, it really depends on the different data tool, what kind of data source that they're using, what they're pulling from. It's heavily from census, but it could also be from local regional data and other sources of information that we hear based on the community feedback that we'll be getting during these 3 phases. So in short, we're not sure yet. That's the goal of having these conversations. And then the next phases we'll be looking at what data sources and tools are out there based on what we're hearing in this initial phase.
Thanks, Allison. So we're going to go to Franco next.
Hi, this is Franco. I'm with the Environmental Health Coalition. Thanks again for this presentation. I was just actually wondering, thinking, and we're pretty involved with the environmental justice element in National City, and then SB 1000 to get environmental justice element kind of passed to happen statewide. What I was wondering is that do we have, I know with the consultant or anything else, is there like coordination or best practices to know from like what other regions or counties, I guess counties might be most comparable, have done when it comes to their EJ element? And is there any like shared information with that could be helpful along with this process? So that's one. My other question was just, because I'll say is that the main communities we have historically worked with are not in the unincorporated areas. It's Body Logan, it's National City, some of the highest, ranking areas in Cal and VirusScreen. But I'm wondering, is there going to be is there any, I know it's a different governmental entity, but is there any coordination? Is there any kind of knowing how those communities are? Because with air quality and those types of issues, so much of it is overlapping, right? One area to the next, and obviously, the unincorporated areas aren't all in one location, right? They're all split between other incorporated cities. So, just thinking about that kind of information sharing or coordination happening, both with other places throughout the state that have implemented EJ elements, but then also, how we're looking at with our local cities and other entities around here if there's, that's happening as part of this process. That's it.
That's a great question, Franco. So the first half of your question is, like kind of like best practices or what has been done across the state. And part of the work that we have been, the team has been looking at is best practices and looking at exactly what you're describing. So that's information that will be shared after we complete our analysis, will be shared with the community in our next round or our next touch point. So, and then the second question is, is there coordination, right? Like you said, there's no boundary for like air quality, right? So if we're looking at that. So I'm gonna look to Allison just to provide maybe a very high level overview or summary about, the best practices and maybe, an overview of what we have been looking at and maybe what you can expect to see in the next round of input in terms of what we've analyzed. And then I think that I don't know if we have a response to your second part of your question, but that's a really great point. But Allison, do you want to say more about the best practices research?
Yeah, sure. So definitely as part of this project, we are looking at best practices, trying to understand what is included in different data tools, but also what are other communities doing, what are other counties and cities doing for their EJL, and how do they define environmental justice communities, which are also termed disadvantaged communities in various parts of California as well. So San Diego County has decided to term it environmental justice communities. And it really varies, per area. It's very different. CalEnviroscreen is a very commonly used tool to determine and identify disadvantaged communities or areas where there are higher environmental burdens. The County of San Diego in 2021 used CalEnviroscreen, but they also mixed that with more regional data. They wanted to bring it down to represent their local conditions, and that's why they integrated Live Well San Diego into that analysis as well. So our work now is to look at best practices, look at other communities, see what speaks most and reflects the communities and the conditions on the ground here to inform how we're going to move forward. So yes, we will definitely be looking more at best practices, and like Esmeralda said, we'll be bringing that back to the community in the second phase of the project.
Great, thanks, Allison. Next, we're going to go to Carla and then Billy.
Hi, thank you so much for having this. So I have also a couple of points to make. The first is that you guys may or may not be aware of, but if you're not, I will just make you guys very aware. El Cajon is the second largest resettlement of people from the Middle East, and I don't see any conversation regarding, that those people as far as being introduced into the conversation, and that's a bummer, especially because they're in the unincorporated area of El Cajon. So Farsi, Arabic, and Chaldean should be languages and outreaches that should be considered. I mean, that's a big group of people that are not even being considered in this conversation. The second is I have a concern. I put in as one of my concerns is public urination and defecation as a public health issue, and that was not listed when you guys wrote down all the comments. That was not listed, and so I would like to have it listed. And part of it is because if there's not facilities for everybody to use, we're talking about possibly, we just had a big rain. There's been a lot of runoff, a lot of water that is just clean the streets, clean the streams. And I have to wonder, where is all that going? How sanitary is our water? How sanitary is our watershed? And is it going to the ocean? Is it going into Lake Jennings that's now then going to be somehow filtered and cleaned to go into my tap water, or Mount Helix, or any of the other water areas? And so I just want to bring those 2 points, and I feel a little disparaged that my comment was not made note of, and so I wanted to make sure that it was reflected. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. And just so that was the poll feature, and so our starting framework were the 7 topics that are included in an EJ element, but it doesn't mean that we can't hear others. So I appreciate you pointing that out, so that it's part of our summary for this evening. And so you know, everything else is on the table for you to share. We want to learn and listen from you all. And thank you for the feedback on unincorporated alcohol, so that we're also, when we go back and do our smaller listening sessions, we're able to make sure that those meetings are accessible and, you know, reflect the communities that we're going into. So thank you. We made note of that too.
Thank you very much.
So let's go to Billy and then Asma. Go ahead, Billy.
Historically, environmental justice communities have been created through the attitudes and policies of government. They could never have come to be without the attitudes and policies of government. So given that there's a tremendous potential for harm, and it's already being realized, by the way, in many rural communities, a type of discrimination that says it's okay to trample on these people, but not those people. I think your job one on this should be a policy in the ordinance or whatever it is you're writing, that the government will not pick and choose communities to turn into environmental justice communities. It's headed that way in many places. And I think that if you don't want the public to do that to people, the government shouldn't do it either.
Thank you, Billy. Appreciate your comment. Next, let's go to Asma.
Hello, my name is Asma Abdi. I work as a policy associate at PANA, the Partnership for the Advancement of New Americans. Our organization is dedicated to advancing the full economic, civic, and inclusion of refugees in the San Diego region, primarily in City Heights. I wanted to second Carla's point that refugees should definitely be included in this conversation through inclusive language access. And one thing we're exploring, I serve as co-chair of the Equitable Development Committee, EDC, and one thing we're exploring through that committee is the connection between how the environmental and housing crisis are linked. Many of our communities need environmentally friendly, quality housing that's affordable, healthy, safe, and is in close proximity to life's essential goods like public transit, quality schools, family-sustaining jobs, parks, and healthy grocery stores. And so we want to live in inclusive and connected, safe, walkable neighborhoods where people feel a sense of belonging. So I wanted to sort of ask, is the county exploring that connection between the housing and the climate crisis?
That's a great question and a very holistic view of things. So I think I'm going to turn over to maybe Dawn or Denise to address that question.
Yeah, I'm happy to address that question. So our team is actually working right now on another project. We're happy to provide the information in the chat in relation to recent board direction to develop a more sustainable land use framework. And that project is squarely focused on that intersection between our sustainable planning principles or updating planning principles to be more inclusive and holistic to address climate and equity issues. In particular, at the intersection of those issues and housing. As you know, we have a very complicated and constrained land supply, and that sustainable land use framework and any potential policy changes down the road will be considered by the board to address that. So it's an ongoing effort, a parallel process, and that process will inform this effort, and the feedback and input that we get from this process will also inform any future policy considerations by the board related to updating guiding principles for land use.
Thank you, Dawn. So thank you for the comments on the chat too. I think folks are pretty active there. Are there any other questions that the group has or maybe additional feedback? Thank you. We really appreciate all of your comments and questions, and in particular, the ones related to community engagement, because again, that helps us to be a little bit more precise in our next touch point when we have our smaller group meetings. I see that Gloria has her hand up again, so go ahead, Gloria.
Yeah, sorry. There's just like so many issues. Like I want to like go through like a big giant list. But because of that, I'm thinking, would the county like have plans to like be putting out like some kind of surveys in like different languages, or when it comes to like outreach? Because somebody made like a really good point about housing as well, and I'm just like, oh wow, like.
Hi, this is Denise.
Yeah.
I can chime in here. Yes. So I just wanted to first address, we are very open to providing other languages. And so during our outreach, when we're sending out notices, if anyone requires or needs any other interpretations, please feel free to reach out to us directly. And we are always available and open to accommodating those. And then thank you very much for your input in providing surveys in different languages. Yes, we would totally be open to that. And if any languages that we provide are not provided, please feel free to give us, let us know, and we will definitely accommodate.
Okay, awesome. As housing, I can go on and on about how people were promised housing in certain regions and it never happened. And this has happened with our farm worker community. So thank you.
Thank you, Gloria. Any additional comments? So feel free to raise your hand and we'll call on you, or we can make sure you put them in the chat. And as you can see here on our digital whiteboard, we're summarizing comments and questions that people are making. So let's go to Shasta.
Thank you. So I put the question in there about doing outreach with tribal nations, and just to put it in context, I'm the environmental director for the Paula Band of Mission Indians, and I work on these sorts of issues all the time, and I'm well connected with all of the tribal nations in San Diego County, work with Sandag, etc. And, so first of all, I want to make sure that tribes are a part of this process, because they're in the unincorporated county, even though they're sovereign nations. It's like you were saying about air pollution, it doesn't stop at boundaries. So these conversations need to be had. And then also just sort of a broader question about how our participation was solicited tonight, because I see there's 28 participants, about 10 of them are county staff. So I realize most people aren't sitting around saying, wow, I can't wait for that county meeting where I can talk about environmental justice. They've got kids to feed and clothes to wash and things to do. But if we're going to talk about outreach, I'm wondering what the plan is for trying to get more community voices beyond people like me who work in this space already.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. So as mentioned earlier, we have a community engagement plan that was developed for this process. And this first, or this initial conversation with the community is great. It's an introduction. And so we have just started going out to you all. And so the input that we're receiving tonight will be used to refine how we go out to the EJ communities in particular, because this is the focus of this process. So we will be coming back. So we appreciate everything that you're saying, because I know our team is taking notes and we're behind the screen, capturing everything to make sure that we do have more precise and tailored community engagement with the EJ communities. And inclusive of everything, of language, context sensitive to the community, and even meeting in places where they're comfortable, right? Not, like you said, not everyone may be coming out to a Zoom meeting or may not have the bandwidth or the broadband, maybe out in the rural areas or things like that. So we're cognizant of that, and all of your input tonight will further inform that next touch point with the smaller group discussions.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So next we're going to go to Sara.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, my name is Sarah Gahi, and full disclosure, I am a county employee, but I'm not involved in this effort. I work in the Department of Public Works and I manage flood control. And, sometimes we bring our plans to the public, and we try very hard to engage with the public. And sometimes we struggle because, just as Shasta said, people are very busy. and they have other priorities of that relate to their survival and existence. And commenting on a flood plan or an EJ plan is not their highest priority. I'm hopeful in this effort, as we reach out to the EJ communities, we can ask them, what can we do to help enable their participation? And, certainly that's going to look different if we're having sort of sort of remote meetings as opposed to in-person meetings. But I think that we can do more, and we as county staff probably can't anticipate what would be the best thing that people need. So I think we should ask.
Great, thank you. Appreciate your comment. And I'm looking at the chat too. And so just a few questions. One was related to an EJ map, if that was for the unincorporated county. Was this shared in the workshop so far? So there is an existing map that we're currently working on. And I don't, honestly, I'm not sure if that was part of one of our graphics. I know that we did have that, but I'm trying to remember everything that was in there. And, but that is on the website, so you can access that and you can follow the link that's been shared in the chat. Let's see. And other comments or questions, we'd be happy to address them now. And just want to, before we wrap up too, just want to thank you all for coming in. As someone said, maybe this isn't the first thing on the list of things to do when people, have, dinner to get ready and other things. So really appreciate you coming out here this evening and learning more about this effort. And, we will be back again too in the next touch point, but really glad that we've had this turnout. And then again, anything else that you want to share with regards to different populations or communities in the EJ areas, that would be, that's helpful too. So additional questions from the group? Great, and I see that there's some sharing of information between groups here. Glad to see that too. So with that, just want to maybe pop the, since there were questions about, process, maybe pop up the slide with the schedule, just to remind folks what that is. Great, so this is the schedule as a lot of questions related to the analysis, best practices, so that will come in phase 2. So we'll come back in winter, spring, so next year. And so please feel free to click on the link to subscribe to the Go Delivery so that you can get the notice. And then also we're very thankful for all the comments about community engagement and how we can reach out to others. So we have made note of that so that we can follow up with folks and make sure that the information gets out and that it's accessible to folks as well. So this is our schedule. We'll be back out in winter, spring. We will have information sent out through Gov Delivery. And then in the EJ communities, we'll be doing more specific outreach. So with that, I want to thank you all for coming out this evening. There's the link to the website and Gov Delivery in the chat if you want to click on there to make sure that you're getting updates. And so with that, I think there was other comments too about planning groups to getting information out to the public. Great. Please feel free to type in your email or other information if you would like for us to provide you with information that you can get out to your groups too. We really appreciate that. So with that, I want to again thank everyone for attending this evening, and we'll get back to you when we come back for our second meeting, where we will be sharing the best practices and more detailed information about the analysis. So with that, thank you and have a great evening.